Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. If you are watching, you will see we are in a four-shot today, joined as always by Mark Ostrander, Grant Turner. I pulled a surprise quickie on GT this morning. To quote him, he thought we were getting called into the principal's office. We got the GOAT, Gary Abbott, on with us. First of all, Gary, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's fun. It's good to see you guys again.
For sure. GT, we're actually not in trouble, so I would have texted you ahead of time. Gary, I wanted to have you on because it just came out that you and Clarissa Chun and Ashley Flavin are to receive the inaugural NWCA Trailblazer Award. So I wanted to publicly congratulate you and just kind of get your thoughts on the award. I mean, I know you're a humble guy, but what this says about women's wrestling and maybe some historical context of what you've seen in women's and girls wrestling throughout the years, the development.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited about this. We saw this award was being created a few weeks ago by the NWCA, and USA Wrestling decided to nominate me because of my involvement going back over 30 years. So the fact that I was selected for the first award is pretty meaningful. I'm real excited about the two women I'm going to be honored with. I actually saw them both wrestle in college. And this award is based upon people's commitment and efforts to build college women's wrestling, which obviously both Ashley and Clarissa wrestled in college before they became coaches and are now back involved at a real high level with their programs. But, I mean, if you go back to the beginning of women's college wrestling, it was really only a few years after women's wrestling got going. And there were a few teams and a few trailblazers, coaches, athletic directors that started women's wrestling. And right from the get-go, USA Wrestling was very involved and supportive of the college programs that were there. I mean, at one point they had 4 or 5 in the United States, and actually most of them had to compete only in USA Wrestling events or against Canadian teams. So my involvement goes back to that, right? And when Minnesota Morris was the first program with a women's varsity, a number of other teams got involved, teams like University of Cumberland's, Menlo College, Missouri Valley College. Those were the teams that really got it rolling. And since then, I've in my job in communications at USA Wrestling, I've covered the women's college beat ever since. So I've seen it grow from very little to something that's very big and something we can be proud of these days.
Well, it seems like every time I'm talking to you in public, you're getting an award. It was awesome to be down in Stillwater when you got your Hall of Fame induction, well deserved. I think that was during COVID, so it wasn't quite as public as it should have been. But you've seen, I guess maybe the word I'm looking for is evolution of female wrestling, because it's girls and women's in what I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, it's different than some sports develop. Women's wrestling developed top down, meaning it got going from the International Federation, started a women's world tournament in the late 80s. And then as that was developed, word got out that it was okay for girls and women to wrestle. And then we built up the back end, meaning the grassroots, the high school, the college, the youth. But it started at the high level, right? And our country had teams right from the 89 World Championships. We won some medals, and since then we've been a power in women's wrestling. But on the college level, obviously, some women were able to compete in college, but only on men's teams. People like Patricia Miranda at Stanford, Cedar Afsun Roshanzamir was at UC Davis. They had to wrestle against the men just like they did in high school against boys. But the development of women's teams, starting with Minnesota Morris, has grown, but it's really grown in a gradual trend until the last 5-6 years, and it's blown up just like it has at high school, just like it has in youth. It's a real exciting time to be involved in wrestling and see that growth. But, there weren't a ton of people that were all that active in it when it just got going on the college level. And again, USA Wrestling wanted to take a leadership role in that, and I was involved.
I know there's monumental moments in every process for anybody, whether it's an individual or a team or a sport. And you've seen all of it. I think for people that maybe have a more recency bias, how important was Helen Maroulis winning, and especially against the level of opponent that she did for, and you mentioned the top down, which I think is unusual. At least it seems like that versus other sports. But how much did that help the grassroots development of girls all over the country saying, okay, and by girls, I mean young girls saying, okay, it's okay to wrestle and you can be a champion and you can be strong and still be feminine and all those things. How important do you think that a match like that was?
Well, yeah, no, Helen was a big deal, and she still is, right? But,
sure.
Some of the big deals had to do with the adding of women's programs at all levels. We got girls added to Fargo. We were at the IOC in 2002, put women's wrestling in the Olympic Games, which I think was a big boost. Helen winning was a real huge boost because it gave them a real life role model. The kids coming up and seeing American and with a gold medal, and the way she did it is historic. But if you look at it, there were a lot of things that helped develop it. One of the main drivers, I think, has been the growth at the high school level, and we have two really big leaders at USA Wrestling, Joan Fulp and Andrea Yamamoto, who devoted only their wrestling involvement in trying to build those high school programs, and when they went from 6 states to 46 states in a number of short years. And so pretty much almost every state in the union, you have an official state championship now. So lots of things were part of it, but the college community is bought in. We're an official sport in the NAIA. We're emerging sport in the NCAA, only a year and a half probably away from our first championship as an official NCAA sport. NAIA had a lot of early leadership in that, as well as the NCAA programs. Junior college has a women's tournament. California junior colleges have a women's tournament. So it's a good time to be a female wrestler because of the opportunities that are growing, right?
Absolutely. Mark and GT, I don't want to hog all the questions. We get somebody of this level on our show very rarely. So if you guys want to jump in with any questions or comments, I would love to give the floor to you guys.
Yeah, Gary, I wanted to ask you, over the last 20 years, USA Wrestling has done so much for wrestling, not only in men's, women's, and now youth wrestling. What have you seen over the last 20 years that surprises you more than anything else with the way wrestling has taken off in the United States?
I'm not surprised. I think it's the best sport on earth. So I'm enjoying some of the young people that are leaders stepping up. That's why someone like Ashley Flavin getting this award. I remember her when she was a resident athlete, when she went and wrestled for Archie down at OCU. When she first got involved with the college coaching and then it took over the program, she was an assistant with Dave Matthews at Life. So, it's a point now where we're developing great leaders in women's wrestling and in wrestling that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, rather than just people that have been doing it for decades. And, as you see, even in the college men's level, seeing a program taken over like Oklahoma State with David Taylor, who's, fresh off being a world champion. And so no big surprises, but what I'm excited about is that there's still growth potential. And as we get more boys and girls on the mats and get more people impacted by wrestling, I think it'll be a real positive thing for society, right? Dan Gable was right. I mean, once you've wrestled, everything else is easy, and it's a cliche, but it's actually true. And the more people we expose to wrestling, the better the world's going to be, I think.
GT?
Well, I mean, I think with the Trailblazer moniker of the award and being able to like really truly blaze a trail for women's wrestling in the recipients that we have, Gary, where do you feel like the new path is going to lead towards? Where do you see women's wrestling expanding into for like the next 20 years? I know that we're at the pinnacle of sport within the Olympics, but like within the continental United States, where do you think we're going here in the next 20 years?
Well, I think you're going to see continued growth at the high school levels. Every state, once they've been an official tournament, has grown quickly, and we still have a few new ones that are getting in there. On the college level, we've got to figure out the Division I piece, right? And that's something the men have to figure out with NIL and all this funding going to athletes in other sports. Wrestling is kind of waiting and seeing how this is going to affect it. And that does affect the women's programs, and that there's not a lot of incentives right now for D1 schools to add any sports. And we want them to add women's wrestling. So, but I think in 20 years, we'll have a real solid NCAA program. We'll have much larger participation at the youth and high school level. And, you're going to continue to see more and more women running women's programs and doing everything, coaching, officiating, leaders. I think that in my lifetime, it's going to still be in a growth area, right? And I think the men are growing too. As we do a better job of including more people, we can build all of wrestling, not just the women's side.
Well, Gary, I wanted to, first of all, I think we wanted to congratulate you. The award came out last night, and, you're literally one of the most humble people I know. I told Mark and GT the story. I've said it on the air. When I first started at track doing podcasts, there were two people that called me that it really mattered, and it was you and Scott Casper. I get a little emotional talking about this because you're just putting out content. You don't know if anybody's watching or listening, and you don't know if anybody thinks it's good or bad. And I remember calling my mom and saying, Gary Abbott called me and said I'm doing good. So I said, I'm good. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, because if it was bad, I don't think you'd call me and tell me it was bad. I just think you wouldn't call. And, to go from, I hope you know how much all of us here have respect for you. We've all worked with you and for you, and you're one of the GOATs for real. And so to literally work for you or alongside you at things like the NCAAs and the World Cup and those kind of things, it's a dream come true for a guy that, along with Mark, we just started doing rankings and they decided to put us on the air. And so I just want to humbly thank you, not only for what you've done for the sport and for this award, but what you did for us and bringing us over to USA Wrestling, because it sincerely means a lot to us.
Well, you guys are doing an awesome job, and I enjoy working with you and spending time with you and encouraging you to continue to do what you're doing. And, getting awards isn't something I'm used to doing, or it doesn't inspire me, but it does make me feel good that people care enough to recognize what I'm doing too. So you guys keep up the good work and share the story of wrestling as well as you can, and let's build this thing, right?
Well, congratulations again. I know we're lucky to get 15 minutes of your time. I know you're always running and ripping up there, but thanks again for jumping on, and for all three of us, heartfelt congratulations.
Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk again real soon, okay?
See you, boss.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
All right. Grant, first of all, I apologize for the heart attack.
Yeah, well, when I know that Gary talks to us individually, or even like when we get to see him about the podcast and what we're doing and like how we're doing. And, once again, I'm like, all right, well, I was like, well, I didn't think we said anything really controversial last week.
You're thinking of the two that just you and I did, and how Mark.
I was like, well, and then of course, then immediately when he popped on, I'm like, oh yeah, well then I can see. Then I started like going through my mind, like what is happening? I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah. Well, you're cool hand Luke. I mean, I gotta give it credit, but it is funny to it was funny to see your face, like, and you and I talk enough privately, man, I think you'd have been like, hey, man, if we had a problem, could you please warn a brother? You know?
Yeah, like just
Gary's
send me
awesome.
like an emoji or something. Like, just you don't even have to say words. Be like
SOS, just
Yeah.
SOS. Yeah, it's great they created this award, and for Flavin, Chun, and Gary to get that award is awesome. And I didn't want to make it about the things I'm doing, but Gary, when he talked about what me and Mark were doing, and then bringing us over to USA Wrestling, Gary comes to every border brawl that's at NCAs, and GT, you know that because you're there, but the level of credibility that Gary Abbott adds to border brawl is, I mean, you get it, both you guys get it, but GT, you're there. Like, people will come up to us and go, hey, is Gary Abbott here? I'm like, yeah, he's watching. This impacts the girls rankings. And it's so much easier to get girls matches when you go, hey, the guy that does the rankings is coming. So if you want to move up, or you want to be seen, or any of those things, like, he's here. And he's actually called me after the meet and said, what'd you think of this kid or that kid? He actually voted for our outstanding wrestler at the last border brawl we did in March. Like I said to him, I'm like, hey, I know you paid more attention to this than I did. I was running around making sure everybody was happy. And not only did he give me his vote, but he went through his logic, and you could tell he literally watched every single match. Like, he could have done the play-by-play back for us. So, you know, Mark, I know you and I have worked together for Gary at NCAs, and you know, I think that was kind of a bucket list for me to work with you and for USA Wrestling. And you're so good at getting those right after the match interviews, you know, but it's a pretty cool experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's the GOAT. I don't think people understand where USA Wrestling would be without Gary Abbott, because I don't think we'd be anywhere near where we are today with the women's program, the men's program, U15s, U17s, these young kids coming up through the, you know, we got juniors in high school on world teams beating out college level athletes. You know, it wouldn't be there without people like Gary Abbott pushing for this. So, you know, kudos to him. Couldn't happen to a better guy.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're watching this, you saw initial terror on Grant's face when we first got on the air. And actually we didn't start the recording till after the terror had passed, but I got a little emotional, so I apologize. It's just when I think about what I first said to Mark, like, I bet we could do rankings better than all these guys, and then chasing it down and literally calling Justin Tritz and starting that, and then being on the air, and then being to here now. It's sometimes when you look back, you know, because I think all three of us just look forward. We're always just, what can I do next? I got to keep it going. I got to keep it moving. But to look back, and Gary's role was pivotal for us, and very much so. The encouragement at the beginning was really, really appreciated. All right. So normally we talk about how we're going to, ahead of time, we talk about the agenda, but we're going to do this on the fly, boys, because Gary was on and I don't want to keep him waiting. So let's start out with the Alirez Mendez match. It was a little difficult to find. USA Wrestling put out a link. They didn't have a streaming partner until the night before. So would humbly like to tell anybody at any of the Beat the Streets events that I work with some of the best people in the country in streaming, and would love to offer my advice and services to those people going forward. I am going to be a part of the Beat the Streets New England one at the end of the month. Alirez, Mendez, basically it was a shot clock point each. Mendez got a step out, shoot off, you know, push out, whatever you want to call it. And then Alirez went for broke late. Mark, would you let this match impact the rankings, assuming Alirez came in at 4? Well, either way, does this change where you would rank Alirez?
No.
So would you have ranked him ahead of Mendez coming in?
No. I would have ranked him number 2 just because Mendez just won a national championship. Alirez took the year off. So I would have ranked him 1 and 2 in just the right order, but I don't think this is going to be I don't know how I want to put this. I think this match could be completely different come NCAA tournament time. I
Sure.
think Alirez is everything we thought he was, and maybe a little bit more. So, yeah, great match. I think those
You thought
two.
it was a great match?
Well, I mean,
They didn't do anything.
no, I
Nobody
agree
did
with you
anything for
there.
5 minutes.
I'm talking about the NCAAs. I think it's going to be a great match. I
Okay.
think those two are going to be in the finals. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Because if you said
No.
that's a great match,
No,
I'm
that
like,
it
it was a terrible match.
was a long 6 minutes. Let's put it that way.
Not a great match. Like, and that happens a lot with great guys like GT. You're involved at all levels. Like sometimes it's these Greco matches where it's, passivity point, and third caution decides the match. Does you see any big takeaways there, except maybe they just wrestled a little tight and hope they'd cut it loose a little more?
Well, I think when you're at that level, like there's all sorts of different results that can happen. You could wrestle tight. You could go be wide open and be 18-18 type matches. I mean, I think it's human nature to be like, well, I wish that they would have let it go a little bit more. Like there would have been more points on the board, but sometimes it's very difficult to put on a show when it's a tough match. Right. So
yeah, for sure.
I think both those guys, when it comes to both freestyle and folk style, I think the folk style match, to what Mark is maybe alluding to, is that that's going to be fireworks. I think
Yes.
that style of wrestling for both those guys, it's going to be fun to watch whenever that match does occur.
For sure. So just a note, we're going to talk about the Budapest ranking tournament next week. We're sort of halfway through the results right now as we record on Thursday morning. And unless it's super urgent, anybody that follows us on a regular basis knows we like to talk about an entire topic at once. But we are aware of Mason Paris being in the finals and things like that. It's just, we're not going to dwell on it this week. It's already on the agenda for next week, so we will not skip it. Let's talk about Gable Steveson going to the NFL. I said this to Mark and Grant separately in conversations. I have been wrong about every single thing I thought Gable was going to do since he's won the Olympics. I mean, literally, if there were 9-7 pivot points, I think GT said he was 1 for 10 or whatever, 1 for something. So I thought there's no way he'll try to do the NFL for a couple of reasons. 1, he would not play a glamour position. 2, the money is not that great. 3, he's got to make the squad. 4, he's never played in the NFL. 5, he can make a lot of money in NIL and college wrestling this year. And 6, if he came back to wrestling full-time and trained, I think he would be the favorite on the USA wrestling level. Somehow, all 6 of those reasons are wrong. So we were looking up the contracts, Mark, and it's pretty good money, even if you're an undrafted free agent, what you make, but he has to make the squad. And he's, somewhere in the 6'6" range. Obviously, he's 250 to 270. It's pretty small for an NFL offensive or defensive lineman, right?
Yeah, and I think what I hear is that they want him at defensive tackle. Usually defensive tackles are 340, 6'4", can move their feet really well, but can stop an offensive lineman from moving him out of the trenches. Gable has so many talents. He's so quick. He's powerful. But, I mean, he didn't play football in college. I mean,
He didn't play football, period.
I don't see how this is ever going to work.
Well, Stephen Neal.
Yeah, well, Stephen Neal had played football. I mean,
He had?
this guy's never. Yes, Stephen Neal played football. So
Are you positive of that? Because I thought the
Yes,
story was he never. Okay.
I know he played in high school,
Okay.
and I'm not sure Gable ever did play. So, I mean, somebody told me he signed a 3-year contract, was going to be on the practice squad. They were going to try to take it slow with him. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I heard.
Well, the contract you can look up, but they got more people under contract right now than are going to make the 50 3-man squad, and then there's other people that make the practice squad. GT, as a representative of Nike, I think selfishly you'd probably love to have Gable back. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I think probably anybody that's basically watched Gable Steveson throughout his career, both, basically through middle school, high school, college, international, like there's pretty much nothing that this guy can't do, like athletically. Like, once again, not very many people get an opportunity to go like and be a WWE superstar. And once again, I think my own personal opinion, maybe like didn't maybe give that enough of a runway in order to get going. I mean, like, once again, that's a skill that you got to learn, like, on the mic, being able to wrestle, but like also like basically do those techniques for professional wrestling. Basically that didn't work out for him. It doesn't mean that like he wasn't able to do it. So like now we're moving on to the NFL. The NFL is a completely and utterly different mountain to climb, but still got to remember, like, Gable is extremely young. Like,
Yes.
a very, very young athlete. So it's not like he's at the end of his career and it's like we're watching, I don't know, Bruce Baumgartner, after wrestling for 16 years at the international level, like try to go and make the NFL team. Like, Gable is extremely young, has a lot of life left in him athletically. So the other thing too is like, man, if they're going to give you a shot and they're going to give you a contract, like, and you can go make that work. So I think everybody's, yeah,
go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I mean, there's no harm in it if that's really where you want to like strive to be great.
Yeah.
And I would say that, like, if they're willing to give you an opportunity and a contract to go and play at the highest form of football in the world, they're like, yeah, I think we can get you in there. Now, I saw, I think on social media that like he's already like basically trying to get close to, or his locker is right next to Von Miller. So it's like, well, okay, if you're going to put a rookie next to maybe one of the arguably top 10 defensive ends in the NFL, that's a good guy to learn from.
Yeah, it certainly shows he's taking it seriously. And I feel like as I listen to us speak and talk to other people, I think, I'm not saying this about you guys, but I feel like I'm being selfish. Like, I feel like I just want to keep seeing Gable wrestle. I had COVID. I was literally laid on the couch, like dead to the world. Mark was calling my parents to make sure I was alive when the Olympics happened, and to, watch him win those matches, and especially the last match with the famous John Smith play-by-play. I think I just want to see more of it. But again, it's his life, and, he should do what he wants. And when people say, well, if I were this guy, well, first of all, we're not that guy. None of us are. And the people saying that never achieved the level of success that the three of us did in the sport. So these are guys that like didn't do anything. Like, what I would do is like, what you would do is irrelevant. You didn't put that amount of time in. You didn't achieve that level of success. So to put your lens on that scenario is absolutely ridiculous. This is maybe a little hazy for a segue, but it does tie to Ben Keuter in the sense that I would have assumed that if Gable was coming back, Iowa would have been one of the people that offered him. Supposedly that had happened in the past. So Keuter announces that he's going to take 10 months off of football, commit full-time to wrestling. We will work backwards and talk about the U20s and U23s because he just came off of a very impressive performance there. Mark is our resident Hawkeye fan. This is good news for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's been waiting to see what Ben Keuter could do. I still think he needs to put on a little bit more weight. I think he looked good. But it's heavyweight's loaded next year. I hope people don't forget how good heavyweight's going to be next year. And I know he wants to be a world champ, and I know he says he wants to be an NCAA champ. Can you do that in 10 months? That's the question. I know he's wrestled his whole life, but, taking breaks for 6 or 7 months at a time playing football and then doing wrestling for 3 or 4 months. That's what we did in high school when we were kids. To get really good, you have to do this full time. And so we'll see what he can do in 10 months.
I understand expectations may be high, but I think that Iowa wrestling is better today than they were a week ago. Like, maybe Keuter doesn't win nationals, but he probably has a better chance of medaling or placing or scoring more points than Bradley Hill does.
And I agree with that. I agree with that.
I mean, I just said, like, it's good news for Iowa, not like, hey, chalk them up for 20 points, 5 pins, and O-dub. You know, to me, Kirkfleet's one of the more prohibitive favorites going into nationals next year, albeit with a close match with Feldman, but, you know, somebody who's at the top. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about, okay. There's two things that have popped up here. One is first of all, the schools can now pay the athletes directly, but the new one that came out is the unlimited transfer rule. And so, GT, correct me if I'm wrong, but it used to be you could only do a 4-4 transfer, meaning a 4-year school to a 4-year school one time. The exception for a second one was if a head coach left. So, like, Wyatt Henson started at Iowa, went to Oklahoma. When Lou left, he was allowed to transfer to Lock Haven, just using him as a specific example of a guy that hopefully some people know and was in the finals of the U23s. Now, you can just transfer. So a guy could go to 5 schools in 5 years. Okay. I'm going to tell you my take on it, and then I want to hear your guys. I think initially everybody thinks that helps the rich get richer. And it probably does, right? Like, you know, Grant, if you have the most NIL money or the most school money, which is already happening, it opens the door bigger because now you can get people that have already transferred once, and you don't have to, well, those guys are off limits. Literally all 330 guys in the tournament are up for grabs minus your guys. But I think it could backdoor help some lower level schools. Like, if we're all really good at wrestling and we're all at the same school, and before we couldn't transfer out, if it was Mark first string, Grant second string, and I'm third string, but I might be ranked like number 15 in the country, and I'd already transferred in here, I can now leave. So my guess is that the top end schools get more top end guys, but that this rule could actually impact depth. That really good depth will find its way out into positions where they can start. GT, I'd love to know your opinion on this, and if you think I'm right, wrong, crazy as usual, or somewhere close to the truth.
Well, I think that there's an aspect of the transferring when it does come to like your programs where like you do seek to have the best room in the country. And I think that in wrestling, and I've heard a lot of people discuss this, like, you know, whatever it is, like the room, like who you bring into the room and who you're around every day affects how good you are. Like your coaching staff, your training partners, basically everything from the top down. I think that like if you basically just are like looking for an opportunity to compete and maybe not being, you know, in the best room or the best environment, like you sacrifice one for the other. Like you're maybe not going to be the best version of yourself by transferring away from a team that like has a lot of depth and good practice partners to just go and being the guy. Now, once again, there might be some situations where it's like, well, hey, if I'm sitting behind Spencer Lee for 4 years, like, and I don't get it. And once again, use an Iowa reference. I could use any other reference. So just bear with me.
Yeah.
But like, if you're behind him, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. Like you could either like learn, but like if you're in the same grade as Spencer, like that's like an immovable object, right? Like, cause he's going to be really good for a really long time. And it's like, well, if he gets hurt, like, yeah, I may get a couple of opportunities, but I'm really not going to be able to get to showcase myself the way that I want to in specifically folk style. So maybe that's a good opportunity for somebody to like go on to another location in order to have an opportunity to compete.
The Spencer Lee comparison is great because when he was healthy, he was so much better than everybody else in folk style Division I. So if I can't beat Spencer, there's an argument I could make the national finals. It's like, well, Spencer kills you. Like, well, Spencer kills everybody. So, that doesn't actually prove I'm not All-American national semis Saturday or Friday night worthy. So, Marco, do you see it the same way in terms of the rich and the poor, or differently, or how do you see it?
No, I agree with you 100%, David. I think the rich are going to continue to get rich. I think the poor could get a little bit better because I just don't know how these coaches are going to do it, because David, we did it. We spent so much time recruiting, setting up, trying to figure out who we're going to have where, what if they're going to be at this weight, what are we looking at? Are we too deep? What happens if we don't get him? We're going to get this guy. We want to keep him available. And all of a sudden, every year at the end of the season, you have to re-recruit all the guys on your team to keep them there. And then you got to go out and try to find the new guys that you want to bring in. It's going to be really tough. But you made a statement earlier, David, I think, on maybe I could be a finalist. If I'm not mistaken, David Taylor was at Penn State. Bubba Jenkins was at Penn State. Yes. They were at the same weight. Bubba decided to leave because I'm thinking he couldn't beat David Taylor, or knew David Taylor was going to be their guy. Went to Arizona State, turned around, wrestled him in the finals, and actually beat him in the finals. If that wouldn't have happened, Bubba may never have been in the finals of the national tournament.
Well, for sure, if he doesn't leave, they don't wrestle each other. And that's one of the most iconic wins of all time. I mean, if you go old school, there's the Jesse Whitmer story where he only started 1 year and won the nationals on that Iowa team that I don't want to, I mean this as a compliment, overachieved. And what I mean by that is wrestled probably more above their seeds than any team in the history of nationals. So, I mean, there are examples. And I also think there's just so many kids that are good at, are used to being good. They're used to being, I start, I'm the guy. And like at Grandview, they are selling a culture. They're selling a lifestyle that's different. Like, hey, you can go transfer to the number 22 team in the country, and I'm sure you'd start. Like, that's, I mean, and I'm not going to name another team. I'm not trying to denigrate or prop anybody up. But if you want to be part of a team that pretty much wins nationals 90% of the time and be a part of a culture and be a part of a place that's going to help you get placed after college and build a brotherhood, this is a spot. If you I need to start and I need to be guaranteed I'm a starter, even if I don't have the best partners, then you should go, because that's not what we're looking for here. I mean, and I'm not speaking for Grandview, but I'm guessing that's somewhat close to the message. I think that's the only way it could work. And I'm sure they're doing the same thing at Penn State. Somebody asked Mirasola about how's it all going to work out. He goes, we just made an agreement to try to get better. Everyone's trying to help each other and themselves get better, and we'll figure it out. And that's such a mature way to look at it. It's also rare. Most people, Mark, if you and I are both 134 pounders to go back 100 years ago when that was a weight class, and only one of us can start. I'm not worried about you getting better. I'm worried about me getting better and me trying to beat you. So, culture is really important in this whole thing too. And I think the other thing to remember is, again, these rules are made for football and to a lesser extent basketball, and wrestling is just like 14 other sports, just getting the trickle down. But it directly impacts our sport. And I think now the other thing that came about was there's unlimited scholarships now, but there's a roster cap. So the 9.9 lie has now been taken away. The school can now give the money instead of NIL and donors. And that's important because a donor now can make a tax-deductible donation or contribution to a university and say, hey, I want this money to go to the Ben Ostrander scholarship. We want that guy on our team. Like, okay, maybe they give him that amount of control, maybe not. But either way, they can get a tax deduction from Mirikitani University instead of, well, okay, I got to go just make a side deal with Ben and he's going to do one commercial for my car dealership. And it's an expense, but it's not a deduction. And if you want to get into the nerd stuff, it's way better tax-wise for these people that are donating money to be able to do it this way. So they can actually donate more money and then make the same difference on their taxes, which is good for the schools. And at the end of the day, I think the one thing all of us would agree about is this is all about money. I mean, it's always about money. One of my favorite sayings is when people say it's not about the money, it's always about the freaking money. So this is a huge impact. And again, we really haven't dug deep into it. And I keep thinking we're going to get a slow week, and it might happen next week because I don't think Budapest will be a real long subject, and we're before junior duels and all that kind of stuff. But to talk about this and also about, just touching more on the schools can pay the student athletes directly, I think are gigantic topics that can be drilled down tremendously. All right, so U20s and U23s were this weekend. A couple of big takeaways for me. I think it's interesting the U20 team has more star-studded names at the top than the U23 team. Talked to a couple D1 coaches about it, and they say, look, some guys don't want to try to make a world team. They don't want to make weight. They want to focus on folk style. I think the underlying tone is the college coaches are getting paid to win folk style matches. And then I think the other underlying thing is if Grant's really good, like he's, say, Ladarian Lockett, Luke Lillidow good, he's coming off a season where he wasn't pushed nearly as much as Mark, who might be quite just as good, but is coming out of a college room and went through the college season and a college practice situation. So some of these college guys are like, look, I don't want to wrestle. Like, I mean, I don't want to compete. I want to work on tilts and inside knee slide stand-ups and things like that. I work on my swim. I work on my outside step. So that was an impression for me. Second thing is how young that U20 team is. I think 7 of those kids were in high school. So, and I think a couple of them are still in high school. For sure, like Duke and Bo are still in high school. And then the third thing is I think 5 guys that are going to Penn State now or in the future made the team. So, like, the rich get richer, and I think they'll only start 1 or 2 of them at the most. So, GT, I got a chance to watch the finals. It was before the gala on Saturday, and I just carved out some time. I don't know what your schedule was to either watch it or at least see the results.
I was able to catch some results on the drive home from Stillwater. So I had had the phone up. I don't know if I get in trouble for like talking if there's cops listening or watching, but I had it up on my screen like as I was like driving or whatever. But I think the one thing about the U23, and I know that like some of the college coaches, like a lot of those, I would say, let's say heavy hitters, not wanting to be a part of like the U23 process, is that like the world championships for the U23s is always in like October. So like you're focused on a world championships that's like in the midst of like almost like when practice starts for folk style. So like it does sometimes like infringe upon like your transition from freestyle to folk style, as like you're basically competing all the way to the end of October, and then folk style season starts and it's November 1st.
Yeah.
As far as like the young guys and all that kind of thing, like making the teams, I'm, as Rich Bender and multiple people within the USA Wrestling organization has said, is that like we're definitely in the golden age of USA Wrestling. We are a very powerful force in men's and women's freestyle, and I know that Greco is working towards being better. But like for USA Wrestling, we're the number 1 country in the world. We qualified the most people for the Olympic Games with 15 out of 18 weight classes. Like we're in a stinking good place.
Yeah.
So I think we are, as these teams are the developmental groups that go on to become our senior level teams and make teams and go and do that. I think the exposure into the freestyle world for those kids at the U20 age group category is extremely important for their development in order to make that transition to one college to, senior worlds.
Yeah, I think you're dead on. Marco, did anything specifically or big picture stand out to you about the weekend?
just how many young kids made our U20 team just kind of really surprised me. Not shocked me, but I think we have 3 that are going to be juniors this next year. They're going to be juniors, David. They're not going to be seniors. I think they're going to be juniors, aren't they?
Well, Luke graduates. Blaze is going to be a senior. Bo's going to be a junior.
Okay. Bo's going to be a senior also.
No, Bo's going to be a junior.
Junior.
Duke's going to be a senior. Lockett's going to be a senior. Ryder's going to college. Barr is in college. Mirasola's going to college. Rademacher's in college. And Rademacher, I don't know why. Yeah, and Keuter. So just one junior.
Okay. So,
but several kids are going back to high school.
Yes. And, like Forrest, he's going to be a junior also, I think.
Yes.
So
correct.
he's in the finals. It's just, and we've talked about this on the pods before. It's just what these clubs have done, what these young kids are able to do, the people that are able to beat. And it's so impressive. And you just sit back and I'm not even shocked anymore. I just enjoy watching these guys perform. Now, obviously, most of them are going to go to Penn State. And, I don't know why. I don't know why we're surprised by that, because they have the best room. They have the best RTC right now. I'm surprised, and I'm sure David Taylor's going to try to change some of that, try to get some of those kids. That is going to make a difference down the road. But at this point right now, it just seems like all these guys, a lot of them are going to end up at Penn State. And then we talk about the portal opening up. You're going to have some phenomenal guys that aren't going to be able to make the team that are going to end up transferring. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it used to be like, hey, I signed Grant Turner. Like, okay, like GT signed next topic. And you said it earlier, like, I got to keep GT happy. like if he places 6th, I got to convince him I'm the place he can take first at. If he plays first, now I got to get him more money. There's always some sort of maintenance. And I think that's the part coaches don't like. I think junior college coaches are more used to it because, like, hey, if GT was a JUCO guy and wins it as a freshman, you're already having that, well, if you stayed on track academically, we'll redshirt you. Probably can't full ride you the second year if we know we're not using you. So you're going to take out some loans. Let me help you get your visits scheduled. Let me make sure you're getting with the tutors, all those sort of things. So I think JUCO guys, as the only coaches that are bringing kids in and sending them out, would probably be the best prepared for this new landscape that's going on. A couple of other things that stuck out to me. Number one, like GT, when you mentioned that the tournament being in October, I remember Mizzou telling me later in hindsight, when Elam got a chance to be on the team when Kirkfleet got hurt, that it really kind of screwed up Elam's progression because he had to get back down to 97 kgs, which is more or less 213 pounds. And that they were getting him bulked up. He was like a 215 or a small heavyweight as a high school senior. And that now they had to unbulk him and then rebulk him and, in season. And they wanted to get him big in the off season and then work on skill in season and technique and strategy and tactics and all those things. So there's the downside to that tournament being so late. The upside is like a guy like Keuter. I think him qualifying because the U20 Worlds are, I think, the first weekend of September, which is the Iowa State football game. So he was going to have to make a decision pretty quickly. My understanding is he's a linebacker and that the linebacking crew in general at Iowa is really good. So he might not have got a ton of playing time anyway. But they're also going to have to, they had to work out money because he was on a football scholarship. And that's not like me knowing something. The rule is if you go for 2 sports and one of them's football, football has to be the one that scholars you. So he's now on either a scholarship or NIL money. A couple of other people that stuck out to me, Hunter Garvin doubling up. I actually talked to Chris Ayers yesterday. And, he's like, well, he's really good. I'm like, yeah, we know he's good. We're just saying, this happened. He moved, he new coaching staff. He was a super high ceiling guy coming out of high school. So cool to see him hit his progression. And let me say some negative and finish on a positive on my thoughts. I thought it was odd that Cale Hughes and McComas missed weight. I know there's a ton of things going on down in Stillwater. They had their Hall of Fame induction this weekend, which GT was there for Sadaka Hata, and a couple other people were inducted, obviously. And then they're trying to run practice, and then, you know, David's trying to get acclimated, and they're still trying to get all these guys out there. You know, but Cale Hughes missed a big opportunity because he was sitting in Final X. And it's interesting because Kyler Larkin lost to him in the finals, and I guess this isn't how it works, but if Cale Hughes, if they'd known he wasn't going to make weight, would Larkin have sat till the finals? What happened was Davino and Blaze made the finals of the mini tournament, and rather than wrestle Hughes, that just became the 2 out of 3. So it's just a different version of like what happened at the Olympic trials, like, you know, where certain weight guys were sitting versus not sitting. The other thing, Pinheiro, baby. Pinheiro is back. GT, like, you got to be excited about that. You know, Iowa State feels like he's probably going to settle in at 57, and Chittum probably goes up to 65. I mean, because I don't think Pinheiro's big enough to go 65, but he beat a good field. He had a hard path, and he hadn't wrestled in over a year, and he's back. He has to sit out the first 2 meets, but I mean, for all the meaningful matches and events, he's going to be eligible. What'd you think of Pinheiro's performance?
Well, I think I saw an article or maybe a quick little interview on Metcalf, or like maybe a verbal or like an article about what, just basically praising Pinheiro for like what he's gone through as an athlete, and then to come like basically stay focused, stay in shape, continue to train, you know, go through this whole ordeal, which a lot of athletes are going through with the state of Iowa. And then really put on a great performance. Like, I mean, we all know that he's extremely talented, and, you know, like he has that ability to be extremely good, but, you know, that takes a lot on a kid, you know, like you're getting, you know, basically in and out of like lawyer meetings, you're going to practice, you're still trying to get an education. You're trying to focus on all these different things that a lot of them are maybe, let's say, out of your control, but then he focuses his attention, goes into a U23 tournament, which was pretty stacked. We all thought like Pinheiro could do really well here and could be the guy, and then really puts on a really great performance, and kudos to him to being strapped up and ready to go. So I think Iowa State has another great problem with that in the middle of the lineup with a lot of different people. We'll just see where it all shakes out, and just I'm along for the ride as a fan. So let's just see how it all shakes.
Well, and the pin points, or however this thing works, Pinheiro was the 3 seed. Somehow Ed Scott was the 14 seed, and Daniel Cardenas was the 6 seed, and Caleb Bracci was the 2 seed. So Pinheiro, and from the round of 16 on, had to go Ed Scott, Daniel Cardenas, Caleb Bracci, and then John Wiley in the finals. And, I mean, that's a pretty bonkers path. And, I mean, this bracket was 128 deep. I'm just looking at it like it's crazy. Like, I'm trying to see if he had I don't think he had a first round, like a double pigtail match, but it was, he did not have a match in the round of 256. So, but he did have to wrestle, I think 7 matches. It's 7 matches because it's 5 to win a 32-man bracket. So 7 to win a 128-man bracket. Mark.
It's a good problem for Iowa State. It's a really good problem for Iowa State.
Speaking of good problems, Mark.
Yes, I have a problem. What
are your Hawks going to do at 174?
Good question, David. I mean, I'm not a Hawk. I'm just a guy on a podcast that likes the Hawkeyes. So you haven't heard me say, well, we are going to do this, or
this week. No this week.
No
French. We.
You know, Patrick Kennedy looked very, very good.
Yes.
You know, especially in the finals. Ramirez is tough, and he beat him 10-0, 10-0. Mostly takedowns. So it just tells you it's going to fit right into folk style. I'm not sure what's going to happen right now, just by the eye view by watching what happened, I'd say Patrick Kennedy's got a leg up on Arnold, but who knows? Arnold may give him fits. Sometimes, David, in a wrestling room, it's not always the guy in the wrestling room can figure you out and beat you, but then you go on to an open tournament, and that guy that keeps losing to that guy can win that tournament, and the other guy has troubles with other types of people and loses. So I have no idea what's going to happen. I really don't. And I still don't know if Brands is going to be at 70. Brands may go down there. Nobody really knows.
Everything I'm hearing is Brands is 84. So
okay.
And Caliendo's going 65. And then you mentioned something which I don't know would work, but you and I were talking one night, or texting, I think it was, and you're like, hey, can Ferrari make 157 for a year? Not AJ, so people that don't think we've lost our minds, Angelo. And he wrestled 165.
Yep.
So it wouldn't be easy, but I also think most kids that are that good are not cutting a lot of weight. And that, 57's got guys moving up and down from 49 because of Parco for a year. So, you got to figure that out. Like there's the other Ferrari, there's Voinovich, there's Rachi, there's Cody Seabrecht. I mean, like there's a bunch of people there. But Ferrari at 157 would certainly be interesting. I think it was fair to say most people thought it was Gabe's spot. Let's just put it that way. Like, hey, PK is going to have to figure out where he's going. And when he's registered at 79 and then runs to the tournament, and he destroyed Ramirez. Like, he not only did he beat him, but he kind of broke him. Like, it's super impressive. And PK is not a freestyler. He's not like a chest wrap leg lace guy that doesn't get takedowns, like scores all his stuff off defense or tricky stuff on the edge. Like he's just a really good wrestler that was wrestling freestyle that's also good at folk style. So I thought that was an interesting development, TBD and all that stuff. Got to give a shout out to my guy, Josh Saunders and Cornell Robinson. He had Saunders and Wyatt Henson on the same team for a year in CBC, and they ended up wrestling each other. And that was a year when I was helping with the team, so that was interesting. But Josh makes the U23 team. He was a huge recruit coming out of high school and kind of been quiet for a couple of years. So for him to bounce back, I was really happy for him. And there's probably a lot of stories like that we're just not as familiar with as like that one for me. So, and then finally, boys, I was at the Beat the Streets Gala this weekend. It was at Navy Pier. They got saddled with bad weather on Saturday night. It was supposed to be a rooftop affair. They had to keep it closed. But I did go with the Fort Dodge boys. So that was an experience, Mark. But they were in good form and good behavior and well-dressed. And Mike Powell and crew raised about $850,000. So congratulations to all of those guys on what they're doing there. And I'm going to see all the Beat the Streets people in a couple weeks at the New England event. So I think next week we'll talk more about the Budapest thing, maybe some more thoughts on U20s and 23s, depending on what you guys want to get to. Talk more about the unlimited transfer rule and the students can get paid now. And we'll be creeping up on junior duels, and then it's kind of a sprint towards Fargo. So anything else before GT? Are you actually home this week? I'm actually home this weekend. I've been home. This will be 2 weekends. This will be my first weekend of 2 in a row that I'm home. So
I'm excited to just be in Iowa for a bit.
For sure. Anything else?
Been working on your golf game. You got the Hawkeye Wrestling Club outing. I think the 23rd or 24th of June.
Yeah, I think it's that Monday. So yeah, I'll definitely be there, my friend. And yeah, we will definitely have a little side wager or something. I'm going to tell you right now, I will not be there this year.
He can't make a fist. Yes, let's go. I want to play Mark now. He said he could have to play one-handed, and that would actually be, it might be even money. Mark one-handed versus me two-handed, putting wrong side at everything else. He's that good, GT, in comparison to me.
Oh, I know.
I'm going to take a year off. So,
well, for Mark and Grant, I want to thank Gary again for coming on. He's anytime you get to be around greatness, it's pretty awesome. So congratulations to him, Clarissa and Ashley, for the award. I'm sure we'll talk about it again at the end of next month, when it actually happens. But it was a shot in the dark, boys. I texted Gary this morning and see if he'd come on, and usual low key. Well, David, I've got a new laptop, but we'll see what we can do. And so, so it was awesome to have him. Congratulations. Good to see you, boys. GT, I promise you, if we're ever in trouble, I'll text you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. We'll speak to you all next week.